Hey guys, it's Ursi. And Shining Reverie, the newest set of Pokemon Pocket, is coming out super soon. Today, we're going to go over some of the new cards in the set, what I think about them, and just chat like friends about some of the really cool cards that I'm sure we're all going to be really interested in. So let's get into it. I do want to say though that I am crediting all of these images as well as the data we're going to talk about today to Pokemon Zone and El Chico Eevee because they're the ones who data mined it and got it to us before the cards actually released. So let's get into it. Let's start with a little one pointer that a lot of us noticed in that trailer last week. That's going to be Pachirisu. This is actually the only early game setup card or ramp card that we see in this set. And its plasma attack does 10 damage, but most importantly, attaches another lightning energy to any Pokemon on your bench. That means I do think it could see play in a couple different types of deck, but I think it's really going to see it shine in some of those mid-range lightning decks that really started to drop out after Space Time Smackdown because there just wasn't any ramp for the deck. But now with that one pointer in the active, attaching extra energy every turn, and after obviously that first turn, you're gonna be going positive every turn that it's able to attack. Like the first turn, it's net neutral, right? You already get to attach to whatever you wanted to attach to via its attack, but afterwards it's going to be able to use that attack and you can still use hand attach. So I think you're going to see a lot of play in those mid-range lightning decks that's going to want to hide those two pointers on the bench to protect while they're getting set up. And we have a new mid-range lightning card that I think is going to be really interesting, and that's going to be Pikachu EX. I think this is a really interesting card. Obviously, it is a fan favorite already, right? So a lot of people are going to want to play Pikachu EX here. But this one has a new attack. It swings for 150, which is a really nice sweet spot for an efficient one-hit knockout. A lot of the Pokemon in the meta right now are like 140 with that Arceus, so it gets knocked out by the attack. Dialga is 150, it's knocked out by the attack. And even in the case that Arceus attaches a cape, or a lot of these like 140, 150 health Pokemon attach a cape with a new red, which we'll talk about later in this set, or even a Giovanni if it's only originally 140 health, this Pikachu EX can still knock it out. And obviously, those water type Pokemon like Palkia EX or Articuno EX still get one shot because, like, even if they have a cape, because of the type advantage that Pikachu is going to have against them. I think that level of coverage for knocking out Pokemon is going to make this Pikachu really, really interesting, especially in this format of high HP, or maybe I'll say like mid HP EXs that are really dominating the meta. I think there's going to be that one problem where there's already a second Pikachu EX that you're going to want to run in a mid-range lightning deck. So we'll see what Pokemon you do play in it. But I think even like this Pikachu could often be swapped out for, let's say, Zapdos EX, who swung for anywhere from 0 to 200 damage. Now you have a consistent 150. Next, we're going to talk about another highlight of Pokemon, and that's Charizard. Everyone always loves Charizard, I swear. But I think, it's a little bit wild, this one, right? It has an attack for 5 energy where it can swing for 150 damage, which still, like we talked about with Pikachu, right? That's a good amount. But for 1 energy, it can ramp itself up to that 5 energy. So you attach the 1 energy, it attaches 3 energies to itself, and then you attach 1 more on the next turn to attack. I think there's kind of a problem here, though, where Charizard EX is already such a big swinger. They're both the same health. Like the Genetic Apex Charizard swings for 200 damage. It does have to discard, but 5 energies was already a really nice sweet spot for that Charizard EX when you promoted it, because you discard the 2 and then you would attach another back, right, by hand, and it'd be back to 4, and then you discard back down. And normally that would be enough to knock out any Pokemon. So part of me kind of worries that this Charizard EX is just not strong enough to see play. The problem with Charizard EX, the Genetic Apex Charizard, isn't that it doesn't swing for enough or it doesn't often hit the Pokemon in the active spot, right? It's still swinging for 200 and normally doing it for 2 times if you have 5 energies on it. It's that it's a stage 2 Pokemon, and there's just not enough consistency a lot of times to hit that stage 2. And since you already did have to commit Moltres spots in the deck, you don't have room to make it more of a box where you have different alternative attackers. I honestly think that Stoke could have been an ability for this Charizard EX, where like when you evolved up, it attached 3 energies, and I still don't think it would be OP. So I'm a little bit worried to see how this Charizard plays. I'm not sure it's going to see as much play as somebody might expect. Um, but I do think it could be that you could have a Charizard EX deck that doesn't include Moltres with this Charizard that you otherwise had to rely on with Gen Egg Apex Charizard. So maybe with the correct support and maybe pairing with different tech Pokemon, we can get around that evolution tax and see it have some play in tournaments. But if you do, let me know about it. More interestingly, though, for that Charizard line in Shining Revelry, I really like this new Charmander and Charmeleon that come in this set. The old Charmander, if you don't remember, attacked for 30, but it had to discard the energy on it, so you really didn't get positive ramping or positive like curve up into that Charizard. And even if you like next turn went into Charmeleon, right, and you had saved the 1 energy on your Charmander, it's still going to attack because that Charmeleon swung for 3 energies. So now Charmander is going to swing for 20 for 1 energy, and Charmeleon is going to swing for 2 with 2 energies for 40 damage. I think this is a much nicer curve, and I think if you do even continue to play that Genetic Apex Charizard, I think this is going to become your default line in that evolution set. Next, let's talk about another really interesting one that people like, and that's going to be Lucario EX. It's honestly another fan favorite, and I think this card is going to bring a lot of really interesting deck building questions. On paper, right, Aura Sphere, its attack is really strong. You deal 100 damage to the active and 30 to your benched Pokemon. So right away, you're applying major damage, right? You're playing a lot to the active, you're putting a good amount on the bench, you're softening them up, and even opening them up to being Cyrused, right, in that next turn. But there's a bit of a catch. In fighting decks, especially like fighting box decks, a lot of these decks, you're going to want to be running the baby Lucario, the 1-point Lucario that does plus 20 damage for all fighting Pokemon. So even here in this case, let's say you have a baby Lucario as well on the bench, this Lucario is actually doing 120 damage. There's a huge problem though, because they're both going to be sharing Riolu. They both evolve from Riolu, and you max can have 2 Riolu in your deck. So realistically, at max, you could have 1 Lucario EX and 1 baby Lucario in play, but then you just have a dead Lucario EX and a dead Lucario in your deck, right? So what is that going to mean for how we build this deck? I'm not really sure, and I'm really interested to see how players decide to do it. But honestly, I think this card is going to be opening up some really spicy plays. Let's say you have that baby Lucario, or let's say you have red, right? I imagine I'm against an Arceus Dialga deck. I swing for 120 my first attack into that Dialga, and I'm going to put 30 damage onto that Arceus on the bench. The next turn, I could Cyrus up that Arceus, do another 120 or 140 because that type advantage, depending like if I had used red or the baby Lucario the turn before, and put 30 on the Dialga on the bench who only had 30 health left, right? That's in 2 turns, 4 points. And so I really think it's a really cool card. It's strong, right? I think it was really going to open up some really, high IQ smart plays that could happen, and it's going to make players really have to stretch their brain and think about what could be happening on the field so that they can counter the Lucario, but also play Lucario correctly. Giratina EX is another Pokemon that's been seeing a lot of conversation. And we already have 2 Giratina EXs in our A2 set between Space Time Smackdown and then the Triumphant Light. But they were both 1-pointers, and a lot of people were talking, why don't we have a Giratina EX? Well, lo and behold, we now have a Giratina EX. And a lot of people were talking about it after the trailer. That being said, I don't think it's as strong as a lot of people are trying to say, right? It comes with 150 HP, which we've already talked about is in range of a lot of different attacks that Pikachu EX could knock it out, the new Charizard can knock it out. It's the health of a lot of different Pokemon, including Palkia EX. So any Pokemon that can knock them out at one time is going to be able to knock this one out as well. And there's also the fact that its attack only swings for 130. And not only does it only swing for 130, it damages itself when it swings for 130. So now it's kind of at 130 health itself, which is in range of even that Arceus attack, another Giratina attack. I just have some issues with its survivability, you know? Like, I don't know if it's as strong as people are going to say. Furthermore, like, the ability is what people are really hyped about. It kind of like self ramps. Each turn you can attach an energy to it that's not like the normal turn energy. But the problem is that like when you use the ability, it ends your turn. And it's not like Giratina has like a gigantic butt on it, right? It doesn't have 180 health. It could probably get one shot by a lot of different Pokemon, depending, especially with that the red that's going to be in the meta now. And so like I could see it like early game, like it could be good if you start with it really early in your game. Like you play it turn one, you use the ability to attach to it. Your second turn, you hand attach and attach to it. And then your third turn, you can swing for 130, which is pretty nice, really fast, right? But it's still going to take 3 turns, even if you go second, which is going to be a problem. So I'm really interested to see how people end up using it. But the problem to me is if you get it late in the game, it's just not going to get set up, like ever. You're not going to use the ability because you just wasted your turn. You didn't get to attack. And a lot of times when you're not attacking later in the game, you just kind of wasted your turn. So if you think of some correct support, let me know about it. But I got some concerns with this deck. You know, I got some mega concerns with it. But I'm going to talk to you one about the card that I'm really, really, really interested in. And that's going to be Paldean Clodsire EX. It doesn't have the fan base like Charizard or Pikachu or Giratina or Lucario. But I am so excited about it. And honestly, it's no joke. First off, it's 160 health, which is huge. Not only is it 160 health, right? But it could be 180 with Cape. We don't know the future what's going to bring. But that's just out of range of a lot of attackers. And that's before you throw that giant Cape on it. Furthermore, its attack costs only 2 energies. And it hits for 60 damage at base, which is really, really nice. But if your active is poison, it jumps up to 120 base damage, which is effectively 130 because of that tick, right? And now, poisoning might be like this awkward asterisk that you might think, like, I don't know that I can make use of it. But honestly, with this set, there's a lot of cards that are going to be able to enable that. First off, we have the Genetic Apex Wheezing, right? That poisons with its ability. You could Koga it up and then put the Clodsire up and attack for 120, 130 with the tick. But more so, its basic is Paldean Wooper, and it does 10 damage, but the effect of its attack is that it also poisons. So by the time you get back to the Paldean Wooper and you evolve up, it's done 30 damage more than likely, or you forced your opponent to retreat the Pokemon out of the active spot, which is also really strong because either you're making them burn energies or you're making them burn like resources like Leaf or XP that they won't be able to use later in the game when you have more of the support that enables the poison to take the poison off the active. I also want to talk to you about a new card in Shining Revelry, which is a stage 1 called Giratina, which is a Pokemon that came out in Scarlet and Violet. But its ability is really similar to Hypno if you remember him from Genetic Apex. Or if you don't, from the bench, for every Giratina I have, you can flip a coin, and if it hits heads, the active is now poisoned. So 50% chance you have it. Every single turn you can poison your active Pokemon, and that Clodsire is now able to run, right? Which is really, really nice. So between all of the tools, I think this card is going to be a lot more consistent than you think of at first glance. It's got a really bulky butt of 160 and does a real 130 damage per turn. So I think this is a real threat, and I am really excited to see how it plays, especially like in long grinding games. I think it could be really interesting for like some type of control deck, especially. I've talked a lot about 2-pointers though, right? I've talked about a lot of EXs. So let's go into some more interesting 1-point Pokemon. And I think there's a couple that you should keep your eye on. First off, let's talk about the duo of Dondozo and Tatsugiri. I don't actually think this deck is going to be like high-level competitive play, but I do think it's gonna make for a fun and maybe like sometimes sees like high placements, similar to like a Lake Trio. I got like a top 16 in a tournament, and I saw it got like top 4 before. It definitely could work, not as consistent as it needs to be. But Dondozo is effectively a 1-point Articuno attacker. When it attacks, it does 80 damage and splashes the entire bench with 10 damage, which is the same as Articuno's 3 energy attack. In this case, though, it is 4 energies, but it's a 1-point Pokemon. And if you have Tatsugiri on the bench, it retreats for free. Like, that's insane. It just gives the deck a lot more flexibility, you know? And so I'm really interested to see how it goes. I also think that because it's 1-pointers, you can allow, like, your Tatsugiri to get knocked out or your Dondozo to get knocked out. Not a huge deal because they're only 1 point each. And I think it'll be really interesting. I could really see it have some creative play. Next, I'll talk about Goldango, which is a stage 1 with 120 HP. It's a coin flip card, very, very, very similar to Celebi EX. Is a stage 1. It does take base 3 energy, but for every metal energy attached to it, you flip a coin, and for every single heads you hit, it's an extra 50 damage. And Celebi stage basic, it's a basic, but it takes 2 energies, it's 2 points, and for every energy attached to it, you flip a coin, and for every heads, you do 50 damage. So very similar. Again, I think it'd just be interesting to see in some metal decks. Really excited to see if it does see play. And I just think it's kind of more of a fun card where you're like, you know what, I just want to go see if I can high roll. And you know what, sometimes that's what you need to do to have fun. Finally, though, I do want to talk about a more serious card, and that's going to be Wigglytuff. Yeah, Wigglytuff. It's going to be a new stage 1 passive support Pokemon, really similar to the original Shaman. And instead of Shaman healing for 10, right, it's actually legitimately a potion's worth of HP every turn this time. It heals 20 health. Absolutely insane, even from the bench. And I think this could be a really go-to tech similar to Shaman, where you'll see it played in a lot of different decks, especially mid-range decks that play for a longer period of time. Like, it's not flashy, but I'm really excited to see how players will experiment with it and what decks will have it. I might honestly even put it in a Clodsire deck. So don't shoot the messenger, but I think it could be really interesting in how it sees play. Finally, let's get into those new supporters because I think they're a real cornerstone of this new set. And there's 4 of them. No items this set. They're all supporters, which are really cool. First of all, we have Iono, and I think this card is really interesting. I think it's really interesting. Both players are going to shuffle their hand back into the deck and then draw from the number of cards they have. So it's not really the same type of like hand disruption you might expect like from Red Card or Mars, which is insane, like can put someone down to 1 card. But this also puts your hand back into the deck and shuffles it. And I've said this since the beginning. I think one of the reasons that like Judge or the Iono in the physical card game are so strong is because it's not only used as a hand disruption, but if you brick, you can shuffle your own hand in. And that's how this Iono works, right? So I think even like, let's say like you brick, I'm playing Charmander, I'm playing Charmeleon, but I cannot hit that Charizard. My hand's like 7 cards full. I use Iono. And now I have a whole new 6 cards, or not whole new 6 cards, right? But a chance for a whole new 6 cards, which really increases my chances of hitting that Charizard. And so I really think that's going to be interesting to see how it sees play. Furthermore, if you're further into the game and there's only 1 card in your opponent's hand, you're still going to shuffle that 1 card in and only give them 1 card. So really going to be interesting to see how Iono is played. I don't think it's going to be used in the same way that Mars is, but still a really cool card. And I really want to see it see play in competitive. Secondly, we're going to talk about Red. This card is deceptively strong, but I don't only mean in its ability, but I think of how it's going to affect the meta. It gives plus 20 damage if you're attacking an EX Pokemon in the active spot. So, like, you know, some of your Pokemon are just out of range of getting one shot. Even like, let me tell you a little story, right? I was at EUIC a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to someone about Infernape EX. I was like, man, Infernape looks so good. It's 2 energies, like free retreat, which is absolutely insane. But I swear it's just missing something. It's missing like 10 damage, right? Like even if I Giovanni, I can't one-hit knockout an Executor EX, which was at the highlight of its thing at that time, like highlight of its use at that time in Space Time SmackDown. And so it feels like there's going to be some plus 20 card that comes out. And here we have it with red. That being said, it is only against EX Pokemon, so not as strong as it just being plus 20 overall. That would just be legit power creep from Giovanni doing that plus 10. But I think even more interestingly is going to be how these cards see play, right? Because now if I play basically a non-EX deck, I am going to turn anyone who has red in their deck to having essentially, a dead card in their entire deck. So I wonder if we're going to see more non-EX decks or decks that have a lot more one-pointers and only a couple EXs. We are seeing a shift towards that. But I think this might even more incentivize it. And so I'm really interested to see how it works. But, I can't wait. I'm so excited to see how this set affects the meta and what we might see in future tournament play. Then we have Pokemon Center Lady, okay? And Pokemon Center Lady is our first general heal supporter and our first ever recovery from special conditions supporter. We had Lumberry, but nobody wants to run Lumberry. But Pokemon Center Lady will heal one Pokemon for 30 health and heal all special conditions. So it's got some versatility to it, right? Let's say your Snorlax is asleep in the active. We can use Pokemon Center Lady to wake it up. Or it's poisoned, or you need 30 extra health, you can use Pokemon Center. So it's gonna have a lot of versatility. I'm interested to see how it'll see play, but yeah, that's gonna be a cool one. Finally, let's talk about Team Rocket Grunt. And I think it is gonna be our first ever trainer that discards energy, which is gonna be really cool. And I'm interested to see how it sees its play in control decks. I might put it in my Paldean Clodsire deck. We'll see if it has space. But essentially, it's a Misty coin flip. You flip as many coins until you hit tails. But instead of adding energy to your Pokemon, it's going to remove energy from your opponent's active Pokemon for as many heads as you get. That's going to be so cool, so interesting, and you're going to see some crazy plays with it. So, going to be really, really cool to see how this meta shapes up. That's all the cards that I think are going to be really interesting. I do think there's going to be some really high impact supporters. I think there's going to be some interesting new cards being brought into the meta. But yeah, if I miss any cards that you think are going to be good, let me know about them down in the comments. But these are the ones I really enjoyed or thought could be seeing some really cool play. Give me your thoughts and feelings down below. Don't forget to hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. I'll see you guys very soon in my next video. We're going to go over what decks you should have when you start ranked at the end of this week. I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye!